Hi, everyone. Welcome in. We're going to get started in a minute. Thanks for taking your time, your lunchtime, to join us for a really good conversation today. Please make sure to mute yourself as you enter. Hi, everybody on Facebook Live. Welcome to our conversation. Okay. So as people are joining, we're just going to get started just because of the time that we have. We have about an hour together to talk about a really important conversation or topic. So again, I'm going to just start and just say aloha mai kako. Greetings, everyone. Welcome to Redbud Resource Group's Acknowledgements Lunchtime discussion, and it's called Learning About Land Trusts. This event is being recorded, and it is currently being streamed on our Facebook, so it's Facebook Live. This recording will be available for those who are able to not attend today, but it also will be on our Redbud Resource Group website under our Going Beyond Land Acknowledgements resource page or a database. So please make sure to check this out. This recording will be available after. Okay, so with that being said, I want to give a little bit of background context. So what is Going Beyond Land Acknowledgements? So Redbud Resource Group has a program called Going Beyond Land Acknowledgements, and it was created to build respectful and effective partnerships with Native American communities. So learning about land trust is actually our second event, so number 2 in our lunchtime series under Going Beyond Land Acknowledgements. The first online event we had with Brendan Moriarty from the city of Oakland, and that was a conversation on discussing the importance of cultural easements as a way to have steps to land. Today we're going to be talking about learning about land trust. So we're going to get started. Hope everyone is ready to get started. Right, great. Okay, so again, aloha mai kako. My name is Sheridan Noelani Inamoto. I am Kanaka Maoli, or Native Hawaiian, and I am the Going Beyond Land Acknowledgements program at Redbud Resource Group resource specialist under Going Beyond Land Acknowledgements program. And so what that means is I provide resources and tools for us to help us go beyond land acknowledgements. And I also wanted to let you know that my dad was born and raised on Makawao, Maui, and my mom is actually is from South Dallas, Texas. And so Southern California is not only my birthplace, but it's also the middle place of my parents' meeting. And here I am. And so I also wanted to share, I'm wearing red today, a little bit of red in solidarity for those on Maui. My family's from Maui, and just to kind of bring attention to what's been happening on Maui, if you're not aware of the fires that have happened. So yeah, if you want to show your solidarity for what's happening on Maui, please wear red. So that I wanted to also add. But without further ado, I'm really excited to have 2 guest speakers today in our conversation and discussion about learning about land trusts. And our first guest speaker is Beth Rose Middleton Manning. Beth Rose is Associate Director of Environmental and Climate Justice Professor and Yochidigi Endowed Chair in California Indian Studies at the University of California, Davis. So Beth Rose, hi, I think you're here, definitely with us. If you wanted to also say hello to everyone and briefly introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you, Sheridan, for that introduction. And thank you for just bringing us into the space, thinking about people in Maui and what is happening there today and the recovery from that disaster. I'm speaking to you from Putman Homelands. I'm at UC Davis, and just excited to be here with you all and with my colleague, Sean Milanovich. to speak about land trusts and easements today. I'm Afro-Caribbean and Eastern European, born and raised in Northern California in Miwok homelands, and really enjoy working with the diverse students I get to work with, as well as community members and nations working on conservation, land protection issues.
Awesome. Thank you, Beth Rose. So glad you could join us today for our conversation. And then, then we have, as Beth Rose mentioned, Sean Milanovich. Sean is an enrolled member of the Agua Caliente band of Cahuilla Indians, Southern California, actually, the vice president of the Native American Land Conservancy, and has a doctor of philosophy in Native American history at the University of California, Riverside. So Sean, welcome. You wanted to go ahead and also say a brief hello and introduce yourself. Welcome to this conversation.
Chima Sheridan, thank you. So, hello everyone. My name is Sean, and I'm coming at you from Southern California in the Cahuilla homelands out in the desert. And that storm that we had, just a couple of days ago, it was a really light rain here, but it did a lot of damage, and a lot of people were put in a lot of danger. And so just thinking about those families and continuing the prayer for those. But yes, I'm the vice president for the Native American Land Conservancy and the secretary for the Native Land Trust Council. And I love our beautiful lands. Our lands bring us strength. They bring us healing. And, I couldn't go anywhere or be who I am without paying respects and going out on the land and just grounding myself. And so a lot of the work that I do with environmental protection and health and ceremony involves our sacred lands. And so it's hold our lands real important to us. Yeah.
Oh, mahalo. Thank you, Sean. Thank you, Sean. Thank you, Beth Rose and Sean, for joining us today. I'm really, really grateful again for having both of you here to have this really good conversation. So before we get into our questions or discussion or conversation, I did want to cover some basic important definitions and background about land trust. So we're talking about land trust, but what is a land trust, first of all? So here's the most simplified definition that kind of explains what a land trust is. So a land trust is a legal arrangement where a designated organization holds and manages land on behalf of individuals, communities, or the environment, whose goal is to protect the land's natural, cultural, or historical value while ensuring its responsible use and conservation. So the one thing I want to point out where it says a designated organization, the thing about land trust, it can actually be organized. This organization could be a nonprofit. It could actually be a for-profit. Typically, nonprofit organizations require donations and other kinds of monies and partnerships. But it could also be an individual, a trustee. The main thing is to keep in mind that it's usually considered individual or private agreement. So it's a collaboration. There's different kinds of land trusts. But typically, most land trusts are established by nonprofits. And also wanted to point out that land trusts are all usually created to protect some sort of natural, cultural, or historical resource of value. So typically, a lot of conservations have land trusts to be able to conserve these resources. Okay, so there are different types of land trusts. Land trusts, there are a variety of land trusts, each with their own mission and geographic area that reflects the needs of the community or the environment it serves. So here's a list of some examples of land trusts or legal agreements that come together under a land trust. Some common land trusts that we've heard of are public land trusts, urban land trusts, conservation land trusts. So these land trusts with their designation have a particular interest, a mission, a geographic region, or different. So for example, public land trust, public land, but again, coming together between like an organization or a community to protect certain resources under these different kinds of interests. Really important though to distinguish between a land trust and federal trust lands or lands held in trust. Now, federal trust lands we know as reservations, typically connected to when we're talking specifically about tribes. So reservations are typically considered federal trust lands in the context of the United States. A reservation is an area of land that is set aside by the US federal government for the use and occupancy of a specific Native American tribe. Key that these lands are held in trust by the federal government for the benefit of the tribe and are managed according to federal regulations. So yes, reservations are trust lands. They're lands held in trust, but the land itself is still under federal regulation or jurisdiction versus a land trust that's created by a nonprofit or for-profit organization, but again, it has a different kind of autonomy and regulation. So I hope everybody understands that difference. So I'll give you an example. So here's a great example here in the San Francisco Bay Area and in Northern California. On the left, we have a native land trust, native-led land trust, specifically Sogorea Land Trust, that's led by urban indigenous women. This is a land trust that is established, it's actually a 501c3 that was created under the Confederated Villages of Lashawn. And the tribal chairperson, Karina Gold, is actually the head of the nonprofit as well as this land trust. But really important to note that this particular tribe or group is not federally recognized. So they had to establish it is a nonprofit. So this land trust could also be considered an urban land trust. It could fit under a conservation land trust. It could be a variety of different kinds of agreement or a trust. But it is not federal trust land. It is not a reservation. So lands under this trust are held under a nonprofit that is indigenous led, but it is not necessarily a reservation for the tribe. Like compared to the photo on the left or the picture of the Yurok tribe reservation based in Northern California, which is federal trust land, even though the jurisdiction is tribal. It is led by the Yurok tribe. But we're going to get more into this distinguishing as we have our conversation and our questions. But I just wanted to start the conversation with some background, some definitions and context. Okay, so these are the discussion questions and the type of conversation we're going to have specifically around land trusts. And here are 4 questions. First, how can land trusts benefit Native people? Why are we talking about land trusts right now in the context of Native communities and tribes? How are land trusts a vehicle for land back? What is the role for Native and non-Native partnerships in land trusts? And what are some challenges? What are some ways these challenges can be mitigated? So these are the questions, and we're going to actually have Beth Rose and Sean answer these questions and have a conversation about this. So I'm going to take us off our share screen so we can have their attention. And again, I have a copy of the list of these questions for our speakers. So we're going to revisit them as we have our conversation. Great. Awesome.
Go ahead or no?
Great. So who wants to, so the first question again is, all right, so now that we have a little bit of idea of land trust, how can land trust benefit Native people? Anyone want to start? Beth Rose, Sean?
Yes, I'll start. Um, land land trust, you know, is a great way to get access to our tribal lands, to gather for ceremony, to gather native materials and first foods, to teach our language, our culture. This is one way that having a native land trust, how we can benefit. Um, and there's, you know, you might say it's kind of like a land back, but there's a lot of work to developing a land trust and keep it going. And there's protocol and bylaws, but the by having access to the land, and usually this land is land that we consider sacred ourselves, from our families, from stories from our community members. So coming together, work, getting to know who your community members are, getting to know who your partners are. So it's a great place just to, as I'm saying, to gather and collect resources, to build strength, solidarity among the people, and teaching teaching the language and the culture from the land is it's phenomenal. We because when we're out there on the land, we develop a relationship, and for many of us, we don't have access to the land, to some of these wild landscapes, to some of these escapes that are connected to our traditional teachings and stories. So by going out on the land, you're developing a relationship with the land, with the plants, the animals, with your heart, and with all the people that you go out there with. And there's a deep spiritual connection that if you don't have one, it develops when you're out there, because you introduce yourself to the land. You say, "Miahue, nena to Sean." I'm Sean, and I'm from Agua Caliente. I want to talk to you. I want to learn from you. So you talk to the plants, you talk to the mountains, and these are all teachings. And over a short period of time, you can develop a fantastic relationship that'll keep you going, keep your spirit happy, keep the land happy, and you feed the land. By feeding the land, you're feeding your spirit, and so you take care of the land, and the land's going to take care of you.
Thank you. Beth Rose?
Yes, thank you, Sean. That was really beautiful. I came to learning about land trusts through thinking about lands that were under threat of development or were closed off from people, traditional homelands, cultural places that maybe were fenced off or in danger of being subdivided and sold, built on, desecrated. And the land trust became a mechanism to, well, to get private landowners to potentially transfer or sell their lands and put it in a status where it would not be developed, and in collaboration with tribes, or if it's a native land trust, where it would be managed and held by native people and stewarded, and there could be learning programs on there, care for the land, and it's in perpetuity. I think that's something, or it could be in perpetuity via a conservation easement. And I think that's something that's important about the land trust, that it recognizes this like long-term ties to a relationship with the place and ability to care for it. What was also interesting to me was kind of what I saw as maybe subverting the original idea of land trusts, which were mainly more wealthy private organizations going way back to like the 1700s, of private citizens who felt that the government wasn't moving fast enough to protect different places, including like some colonial lands. on the East Coast. And so they formed their organizations and they purchased these lands and held them for some sort of public benefit, but who the public was unclear. It was usually other wealthy white landowners. So I really like the idea of kind of changing how land trusts are used and thinking about them more for justice and access and land back and stewardship. And there's all that potential within the vehicle of a land trust and the tool of the conservation easement.
Awesome, great, thank you. Beth. Okay, second question. How are land trusts a vehicle for land back? We hear this idea of land back, but want to kind of dive into that conversation a little bit more, but through the vehicle of land trust.
So when I think of land back, I think of, how come we don't have the land? How come we're not occupying the land anymore? What happened to it? Why were we removed from the land? Why are we not gathering there? And so it just takes me back to the colonial genocide that has happened on our land, and that we were forcefully removed and from our land. The land was taken from us. And if we did not move willingly, we were exterminated. Our ancestors were exterminated. And so that's a very fundamental part that we need to take into consideration and remember. Most of the tribal people, when the newcomers came on their land, when these invaders came, they came with weapons, and they shot first before they asked anything. And then our land was taken, we were removed, and so it carries a lot of trauma with it. And so by going out on the land, that helps to heal from it, but identifying it really helps. And so thinking of land back, acquiring land to put it under tribal management, to put it under a tribal land trust is real beautiful. Not being able to have gone to a particular property for generations to go gather medicine, and then finally, or to make some baskets. Like one example is up in the mountains up in the Santa Rosa, San Jacinto Mountains near us. We have the Idlewild School of the Arts, and our people had been removed from that area a long time ago. But recently the school had invited us back and is giving us 5 acres, returning 5 acres to the people, so that we can go gather the acorns there, to go gather the strawberries, to make our baskets along the creek where the grasses grow. And that's phenomenal, not being able to have gone there for over 100 years, and now we're being welcomed back by the school and the community, and asked to share. It has profound effects on our health and our healing. And so land back can take the form of actually giving land to land trust, to tribes. It could take the form of, to me, as it, like there's a shared resource, and another group is inviting tribes back, inviting the indigenous people back to the land to gather, to collect, to harvest material, to collect foods, to have ceremony. So land back doesn't actually have to be on a written document, but because that's not what it was in the first place. It wasn't land wasn't owned just because you had a title to it, a piece of paper. Creator gave us the land to hold collectively, to use in a good way, to feed, to nourish our people. And so we can share these resources amongst one another, with one another. And that to me is, just that's the invitation that we need to take and to work with, because it's not always easy just to to collect money, because land can be can cost a lot of money. It costs a lot of money. And it was a couple of years ago, the Native American Land Conservancy, we I think we raised $39,000 towards a land purchase. We had the Desert X out here in Southern California, and we were able to raise $39,000 to buy a piece of property. So we're still holding that money right now, but and to use it where we can for a piece of land, but and that was all in the hopes of land back. But the idea is that we need to work together and realize the genocide that has happened, realize that we have been removed from the land, and that by giving land back, that's giving a rebirth to the indigenous people, a rejuvenation. You're helping the indigenous people commit to the land for the next generations to come up, so that they can have a beautiful life, a life of ceremony, a life of understanding and who they are and where they come from, and not having to be afraid, and being able to learn their language. That's what land back is. That's how I see it.
Thank you, Sean. Beth Rose.
So earlier, Sean mentioned the Native Land Trust Council, and I think the groups in the council, as well as many other Native land trusts that have formed over time, are just such incredible examples of land back. And they're all over. So there's land conservancies on the East Coast, in Alaska. There's many in California, Native land conservancies, and they're receiving land back, and or they're developing agreements with agencies and private landowners such that they have long-term stewardship and access to lands, even if they're not fully transferred yet. So I think the land trust is just one of many vehicles for land back, to facilitate land back. A private person or a company or a school or any type of entity could donate or potentially sell, but ideally donate land to a land trust as a conservation nonprofit. They can receive potentially some tax benefits or some funding that helps with that land transfer. So it's a vehicle for transferring land and for engaging a broader community and thinking through how they could really participate in land back. They could support a Native land trust, either through land or labor or donations, because land trusts can raise money to purchase lands if lands aren't being donated, or to cover the costs of stewardship over time, potentially to pay community members to help with caring for lands. So it's just a useful vehicle, not without its challenges, but a tool.
Thank you both. Thank you, Sean. Thank you, Beth Rose. I love that you said that land trusts are just one vehicle, but there are many ways to support land back, right? And I think you both actually touched on that too. And so that leads to the next question. What is the role for Native and non-Native partnerships in land trusts? And so Beth Rose, I know you have some experience, speaking of Sogorea Land Trust. I know that you have a connection there, but yeah, I don't know, either one want to kind of talk about the role of Native and non-Native partnerships?
Well, I could say for the book, Trust in the Land, which was really a collaboration with a lot of people who I worked with on that text. That began with an inquiry from a non-Native land trust that wanted to figure out how they could better work with local Native people whose land they knew they were working on, traditional cultural place, family village place. And they were able to successfully collaborate to stop the land from being subdivided and developed. But there are still, challenges. But that question from them and from the family and community led to this larger inquiry about how could non-native land trusts and tribes, or non-native land trusts and native families or tribal organizations work together. And some of it came out of some concern about, when I first started working on this in the mid 2000s, there was a rapid growth of small local non-native land trusts, and they were purchasing and setting aside and enclosing land for conservation that was within native homelands without talking with native people, without consulting with tribes or families or communities. And that was really problematic because it was just basically another layer of keeping people out. So we looked for opportunities for conversation, and Sean and I have worked together on this for some time with the Land Trust Alliance and other organizations, trying to bring people together, trying to raise awareness among non-native conservation organizations about the fact that they're working on native land and how they could learn more and build relationships and think about transferring properties or doing work cooperatively. So there's a lot of opportunity there. We've seen some really good outcomes, I think, with the land trusts, non-native land trusts, even acquiring land and then transferring it to tribes or native nonprofits, and or native nonprofits holding easements on lands. There are all sorts of relationships and arrangements, but it's really based on relationship, communication, trust. I think the non-native land trusts in particular, maybe being open to unlearning some of the settler history they've been taught and relearning about Indigenous history, Indigenous homelands, Indigenous presence, and ways to collaborate.
Awesome, Sean.
Beth Rose, you hit it. It's about building relationships. It really is. And as Native people, we've been told by our elders for generations that we are the caretakers, the stewards of the land, and that, from our own traditional areas, like where I'm at in Palm Springs area, it's our creation story tells us that we were given all of this land by our creator Amna, and to not only build a beautiful place for our families, but also to take care of the plants, the animals, and the other life forms that are here, and to help one another. And so it's really about building relationships. And so from the Native perspective, working with non-native entities or non-native land trust, we have to work with one another and build a relationship. And it starts with trust and just learning about sharing the native culture and history about the land. So like in the Palm Springs area where I'm at, with the Native American Land Conservancy, we work with several non-native land trusts, the Mojave Desert Land Trust, Wildlands Conservancy, and we share the cultural history about the land. We share the history, the stories that are connected to the land, why the land is important, why we call it such, why it carries such a name. And we also share about, when we go out to harvest for agave, for flowers and buds, for mesquite beans, or for the basket material, that we just share about these plants, how to care for the plants, talk to the plants, and how you gather the seeds, and and so just having an open communication with the different land trust. And it's not only the land trust, but it's the communities that we live in with all the with everyone, because we're we all have our own areas, and there's a huge diversity of people and ethnicities from different places around the world, that are concentrated and that are just living in one area now. And so it's a great step that the Native people have to do, but we have to share our perspective, our culture about the landscape. And by sharing about the landscape with the general community, with the different agencies, with the land trust, our ideas, our thoughts, and our voice will be incorporated into those management policies, also into having stewardship, co-management of the lands. Just recently working with, and I know it's not a land trust, but earlier this year, the Chemehuevi Band of Mission Indians, was able to get co-management inside the Joshua Tree National Park. And that's a beautiful step forward. So for a tribe to have management in such a profound place such as a national park, Joshua Tree, we need to be our tribal people need to work with all the different mountain agencies, agencies that are managing our public lands. But the smaller groups, such as the land trust, they're easier to talk to. They're more available, and they reach out to us a lot. And that's what I like. They reach out, they ask for our help, they ask for us to come and share, and then we share resources, we share ideas and strategies on how to acquire properties, on how to attack a certain problem. And it's all about sharing resources. And that comes with building a relationship with one another. And it just doesn't stop. It's ongoing. And so I'm sure most of the people that are here on this Zoom, might work in land trust, and that they're always working with an, an array of land trust, land conservancies, tribal and not. But we need to do that to build relationships and trust in one another, that we are going to do the right thing. And it's also about introducing our families, our personal families, and sharing those families, our kids, our grandkids, and taking them to some of the meetings that we go to introduce the kids, to show them, this is the process that we need to take, to build sustainable relationships and management practices. And then the ideas that they would bring their families, because it's just not you and I mean, we're doing the busy work, but we want our families to be a part and to help manage these lands. And it comes from both sides. Yeah, that's what I'd like to share.
Awesome. Thank you, Sean. Thank you both. I think, Sean, you said it perfectly. I think it's just really interesting. We're talking about land trust, and that word trust, right? It starts with relationships. And here at Redbud, our grounding values are respect, reciprocity, and relationships, right? How important is that? And I think also when you were mentioning families, you're thinking long term. So land trusts are established of thinking long term, for generations to come, right? To protect that,
That's
and
right,
we all
Sheridan.
can we can all participate in trust, right? In building relationship long term. And so land trust is one way, but it's also an example of a value that can be applied in many different ways that are mutually beneficial. Which leads me to my last question for this particular conversation, really briefly. You both have kind of touched on some of the challenges, right? When we're talking about where looking back and where we are now. But what are some challenges and what are some ways that we can kind of navigate these challenges and mitigate these challenges as well? So just really quickly, and then we're going to open it up for more of a public Q&A. For those of you who have questions, feel free to put it in the chat or Facebook Live. We have my colleague Rose Hammock behind the scenes, kind of looking out for those questions. But yeah, what are some challenges? What are some things to consider moving forward that we want to be realistic, right? So, but I know there's ways to mitigate them. Any thoughts and shares on that?
Yes, the one of them is just it always includes access to land. That's always a struggle. And sometimes native land trusts are asked, well, we're being asked to show, well, what is your relationship with the land? What is your history? And so it's like we have to document, we have to show proof that, that this was our land. And to me, I mean, to show that this was our land, that we lived here, that this was part of our history, our stories, that's always a struggle for me. Just because we're always being asked to share this. Well, show proof. What's your proof? It's not in any of the history books, so how do we know that this was your land? How do we know that this is what you called it? And so there's always that part of it. But it's always just getting access to the land, getting sometimes it can be access, trying to bring the people out to the land. And I see that as a struggle sometimes now, and that we have some great lands, but trying to bring the people out onto the land and share that story can be a challenge. And just trying to navigate that channel, trying to bring out the youth, trying to bring out different land management agencies, trying to bring out the tribal community. It can just be challenging, trying to secure funds for some of these properties and grants. I know right now, the Native American Land Conservancy, we're working with the group in the Sierra Mountains with some property and just trying to secure funding for this prominent property that we're working on. And it's real challenging. And not all the tribal groups are federally recognized. And I see that as a barrier. To me, that doesn't matter. If you're indigenous, then you're indigenous. But to receive funding, there's funding to work with tribes if they're federally recognized, but the funding changes if you're not federally recognized. And so that is an issue, and just also in land management.
Yeah, thank you. Just a couple other challenges. I was thinking of governance of land trusts. So typically they're nonprofit organizations, which usually have, like a president or chairman, a vice, secretary, treasurer, et cetera. Sometimes that doesn't fit culturally. And so figuring out how you navigate having a nonprofit land trust that has sort of required positions with what works in the community and what really represents the different families who are part of it. So that's one. Typically, land trusts are involved with conservation easements. and or agreements that place some restrictions on the property in terms of, it can't be developed in a certain way, or it has to be managed to protect a certain plant or animal that might be involved, some sort of conservation restriction that can constitute in some ways an infringement on sovereignty, on decision making about how to care for a property, for a place. And that also relates to climate change and just kind of general changes that could happen. Maybe the species that, a certain donor was focused on protecting and gave the land trust money to protect the land for, maybe it moves off the land. So it changes how you steward the land, maybe, and what you can do on the place. So sometimes there can be limitations on the flexibility of stewardship with some of the conservation agreements. Sean mentioned fundraising. I think that's key, especially in situations of competition with other conservation organizations or entities. And so one thing to think about in terms, again, of relationships is how can we share and work together. I know of a wonderful example right now where an agency has provided the funding to purchase land, which is being transferred to a tribe. The land trust is a partner in developing some of the management plans with the tribe, receiving some support for their time in doing that, but also deferring to the tribe's leadership in stewardship and planning for that place. Funding also has to be long-term, thinking in terms of endowments for the land, not just the purchase, but also long-term stewardship and care of that place. And then lastly, the public access question. Sometimes funds that come to help purchase lands to transfer them to land trusts, or funds that help support conservation purchases or easements, require some type of access. But if it's a culturally important place, that might not be appropriate. I think there's some great examples out there of how Native land trusts have navigated that, perhaps restricting access to a certain portion of the landscape and informing people about the importance of staying in that area to protect the whole place. But just things to think about in terms of when kind of broader conservation law and policy doesn't reflect traditional cultural perspectives.
Great, thank you both. Yeah, and thank you this is a range of ways, right, to mitigate some of these challenges. So thank you both for sharing and explaining, but that we all have a role, that we all can play, and we all can contribute, and we all can collaborate, right? We all need each other. I think the other thing I wanted to mention was just to acknowledge the diversity of each community and how many tribes just alone in California, right, that are distinct and diverse from each other, which means that all of us need to know where we are and who we are. If we're wanting to partnership, who are your local tribes in your area, and what are the needs to support their sovereignty. And it may look different. It is going to look different depending on what the challenges are and what the needs are. So something else, but that doesn't mean that we all can contribute something. It's not like we don't, there's ways, right? So I just want to thank you again both. This concludes our main conversation of our discussion about learning about land trusts. We are going to open it up, but I also wanted to also share that Redbud Resource Group, this recording is going to live in our Going Beyond Land Acknowledgements resource database on our website. So please visit our website after we conclude. And also there are many resources on our database that includes our Steps to Land Back video series, as also highlighting other ways to support, right, and collaborate, and we all can play a role in supporting and strengthening tribal sovereignty for the benefit of all of us. So, and again, that lives on our Redbud Resource Group website and also our YouTube channel. So please check it out. All of this recording and this will serve as a resource and will live in both areas. So again, thank you. And thank you everybody for taking the time of your lunch hour to join us live and to listen in. So yeah, thank you everybody. And so without further ado, Rose, I think we're gonna open up to some questions. I don't know if folks have put some questions in the chat. We have a lot of
questions coming in.
Great.
I think Beth Rose, you were just hitting to this question, but it says, I would love to hear Dr. Middleton talk about the issue of tribal sovereignty when working with land trusts who are seeking legal assurances of permanent conservation. Sometimes it seems like we are asking Indigenous people to contort themselves to meet the U.S. legal system.
Yeah, I'm sure Sean can speak to this too. That's a tricky question. I always think, it's a voluntary arrangement and it's just one tool, but it can be problematic, and there's no avoiding that. In terms of when you're engaged in a partnership, when there's a conservation restriction, a legal restriction on what you can do on the property, and there's some other entity potentially monitoring that. So the situation might be like a transfer to a native land trust or even to a tribe, but there's an easement to prevent any development of that land and to forward or facilitate conservation held by another party, which might be a non-native land trust. It could be a public agency. So you have this kind of arm of enforcement of that conservation agreement, but it's an agreement. So if the tribe or the native land trust agrees to be in that relationship, then perhaps they're agreeing to those terms. But I feel like the relationship part of it is key, that there has to be room to communicate and negotiate, that the partner has to be recognizing that they're working with a sovereign entity, that they're working with First Peoples, and have some deference to that fact, because yes, it can take this sort of colonial tone, thought of that way, and it can be problematic. But I think it's a negotiation, and it's up to the parties who are participating to figure out what works for them in this situation. What do you think, Sean?
I've got some spraying going on outside my house. I hope it doesn't bother anyone. I can hear it, but having tribes, land trusts, native land trusts, all working together is the goal. That's what we want. But it's a step by step, and we all have to learn from one another, and we have to come to the table with integrity to meet, and we know what we want, and we just need to be honest with one another. And each of the groups, so a native land trust will be a lot different from, let's say, a tribal council, in that the tribal council is it's a government of a nation, and so we have to be mindful of that. But the native land trust can consist of native people from different communities, and so I just think we all need to work. We got to be selective and be honest and come with an open mind. We need to come with an open mind when we're working together. And if I wouldn't hold anything back, and that's when it comes to the process of of maybe litigation or future things that kind of put a damper in the way on how things are moved forward, that we just need to put everything out on the table and be open to it.
I appreciate what you said there, Sean. And I just also wanted to briefly say that the examples I've seen that have worked with native land trusts or tribes even working with conservation entities have been when that's what the tribe or the native land trust wanted to do. They wanted the land not developed, and they have a plan for caring for it in that state. So it just fit with what they wanted to do. If it doesn't fit, then there are other mechanisms.
Right. One example is with the Native American Land Conservancy. We had the 29 Palms Band of Chemehuevi. They had this land out in the Old Woman Mountains, but it was they were having a hard time just trying to manage it, and they wanted to make sure it was protected, and so they formed the tribe, put together different resources, and invited different people to the table to come and start this land trust that would be composed of multiple tribal members from the community, and also members that had certain skills from the community, members that from the community, which included people that are deeply passionate about protecting the lands, people that might have skills as funding, or also just putting things out in the media. And we also want people that are open and not afraid to talk, but to share their resources, all the good and the bad. And so putting a team together like that to form a land trust is imperable, and you need that. And so you invite people from the community with certain skills, people from the tribal councils, people from different land management agencies, but it's really that people who care and want to move forward and protect the land. That's what you want most.
Thank you, Beth Rose. Thank you, Sean. I think you actually touched on it, Sean, some questions about capacity. And, sometimes tribes are really small, and, but it sounds like when you have people who actually care and interested and are willing to share resources and step up, that's an ideal collaboration and partnership in moving forward in any kind of agreement or relationship. Yeah, this is such a rich topic. We have about 4 more minutes, but I just wanted to also share, not only will this is being recorded, but I'm hoping that both of you will be able to share some resources that we'll be able to put on our website to kind of continue this conversation for people to look into, and in case they have questions. I know there's a lot of questions. I don't know if we have time, Rose, for one more question, but we're about to close in a minute. So, Rose, any other hot topic questions that we could ask before we end our time together?
I think we covered many questions that were in the chat. Some we did not get a chance to get to, but maybe Beth Rose and Sean can drop their emails, and maybe people can continue to forward some of their questions there. And just very grateful for everyone who could be here with us today.
Yeah, so very grateful. So very grateful to be moderating and hosting this conversation with both of you, and being in Coast Miwok lands adjacent to Wapo and Southern Pomo lands, also known as Santa Rosa or Warner Park, where I am, specifically in Sonoma County, Northern California. So really grateful to be able to be here and facilitate. And again, like Rose was sharing, thank you everybody for joining us and taking your time to be with us to have this really important conversation. Hopefully we were able to cover a lot of some of your questions. And again, there's lots of really great resources. I'm gonna shout out Beth Rose. I have your book with me, one of your books, Upstream, Trust Lands and Power on the Feather River, as one resource. But there's a lot of ways. So thank you for putting in your contacts and information, and for other ways for other people to get in contact with both of you. It'd be really great in doing this work together, right? And also thank you, Sean, for wearing red. I know that you did that for Maui, and thank you for all of you who put in the chat your sentiments for myself and my family on Maui. Really appreciate that. So many ways to support, but feel free to reach out to me privately if you want more information as to how to support Maui. But yes, thank you everyone. Thank you for joining us. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Yeah, take care. Thank you everybody.
Bye, pa.